Today's recipe and all the recipes that we've used on this show so far can be found on our website, Tweeton.com. Be sure to look us up. Not only will you find our recipes, but you'll find other links to Greek sites that will give you insight into the Greek culture and, of course, a lot more recipes. You can also find a way to order tapes and a way to email me. And believe me, I do love hearing from you. And if you have a family treasured recipe that you'd be willing to share with me, boy, I'd just love to hear from you. I'd love for you to send it to me. I'd love to look at it, read it, dream about it, and maybe even use it on the show. Melopita is a delicious, sweet, creamy pie. Meli is the word for honey in Greek, and pita, of course, refers to any kind of pie, whether it's a pie with the thin phyllo pastry or a pie with a regular pastry crust. This is simple, it's delicious, and you can make it very quickly with some special ingredients. The first thing you need is a pastry crust, whether it's homemade, frozen, refrigerated, it really doesn't matter, but some sort of pie crust, pastry pie crust. You need 3 eggs. For flavoring, you need to decide what kind of flavor you want. If you want a slight lemon flavor, then you need a whole fresh lemon so you can grate some peel. If you want a slight cinnamon flavor, then you just need some ground cinnamon. Because this pie is similar to cheesecake, you need some cheese. You need a pound of soft Magitra cheese, but that's kind of hard to find. So a good substitute is a pound of plain ricotta cheese. And for sweetening, you'll need a half cup of sugar and, of course, half cup of honey. That's what makes it really Greek. So when you put all this together, you'll have a delicious, tasty, but simple dessert. Now the first step to making this pie, Melopita, cheese honey pie, is to get a pie crust ready. You can use your favorite pie crust recipe. Today, I'm using a frozen pie crust. And that's one of the things that makes this so easy to put together, because if you use something frozen, you can whip all this up together quickly and still impress family or friends if they come over. Now with the frozen pie crust, you just have to be a little careful. Sometimes you'll find that frozen pie crusts have cracks in them. Well, the first thing you want to do is bring it to room temperature or thaw it out. And then for the cracks, just dip your finger in some water and rub the water, not a whole lot. Rub the water along the crack and work up a kind of a glue to glue the pie crust back together. Because the last thing you want to have is your filling oozing out under the pie crust. And this was a pretty good pie crust. That was it. That was the worst crack. Sometimes you'll have to do it a couple of times. Now, one problem in dealing with pie crust is the bottom often gets soggy. And for that reason, a lot of people like to pre-bake the pie crust slightly before they put in the wet, moist filling. And that's what I'm going to do too. To get this ready for pre-baking, I'm just going to put some aluminum foil in the bottom of my pie crust, like so. And I'm going to weight it down with some dried beans. Now, this is a package of beans that I've had for a long time. I haven't gotten around to really using them. So I'm going to put them in here to weight this down so the pie crust doesn't puff up. Spread it out. And then I'll just keep these beans. Keep them in a special place just for pie crust, because once they've gone through this baking process, they're really no good for cooking. All right, now this I'm going to take over to the oven and pre-bake. This is also sometimes called baking blind. I just want to bake this for about 15 minutes in a 350 degree oven. My goal is not to really get it dark brown, real crispy, but just to bake it enough so that it's set and it won't get soggy. So in it goes. The first thing I need is a pound of soft cheese. Now, if this were a true Greek cheese and honey pie, I'd be using soft Magitra. Now, we're very familiar with the hard Magitra, which can be grated and sprinkled on pastas and salads. But the soft Magitra is hard to come by. You'd have to go to a specialty market, and really, you can substitute ricotta cheese, and you can find this anywhere. So you can use the regular ricotta, the low fat, the no fat. It really doesn't matter. But you do need a pound of this soft cheese. And I suppose you could even use cream cheese, but the ricotta has a texture that's more similar to the Greek cheese Magitra. So I think it's a better substitute than cream cheese. Okay, there's my cheese. That was easy enough. What I need to do next is add my eggs, and I'm going to have 3 eggs. That's not very hard. Crack them and dump them in. This last egg, I'm going to do something just a little different. I'm going to set aside just a little bit of the egg white in a separate bowl. If the egg white will ever get set aside. Okay, this egg white wants to hang on there. Okay, and then just dump the rest in the big bowl. Now you may wonder why in the world I'm setting aside a little bit of egg white. Well, the reason is some people just swear by brushing the bottom of a pie crust with egg white before putting in a liquid filling. And they say that the egg white actually provides an impenetrable barrier so that the bottom crust can't possibly get mushy and soak up the filling. So I'm going to try it. Another thing that you can do, and lots of people swear by, is brushing the bottom of a pie crust with some melted fruit jam, a high sugar quality fruit jam. And that would work too. For something like this pie with the cheesecake-like taste, maybe an apricot jam would be really good, or a berry jam. Now what I want to do is get my mixer going and mix up the eggs and the ricotta cheese until it's all creamy. Okay, that's good enough. And I need to add some other ingredients. Of course, I need some sugar for sweetening, and about a half cup of sugar. And I need some honey. And before I pour the honey in, I'm just going to spray my half cup measure with some vegetable oil just to make it easier for it to pour out. Now that's the real basics of the pie. Now it's time to flavor it. Now it's time to decide what you want for flavoring. You could go with grated fresh lemon peel, and that would be delicious, or you could go with cinnamon. If you were in a hurry and time was a factor, I definitely go with cinnamon because it's so easy. All you have to do is just open up the bottle and measure out a teaspoon of cinnamon. But I kind of like the lemon, and that's what I'm going to do today since I have a little bit of time. What I want to do is eventually get 1 teaspoonful of fresh grated lemon peel. It's been 15 minutes. I'm just going to take this out. The pie crust is out of the oven from its pre-baking. What I need to do now is just kind of leave it alone, let it cool with the beans and the aluminum foil still in the center. That way the crust won't puff up at all. So I'm just going to leave it alone while I continue on the filling. I have a grater. I'm using the section that's made for citrus peel. And here's my lemon. All I'm going to do is just grate and grate and grate until I can get to 1 teaspoon's worth. And of course, since I'm using this peel of the lemon, I have washed it with soap and water and rinsed it very carefully. And this will take a while. That's why, if you're in a hurry, I'd go with the cinnamon. I just got back from going to the Greek festival. I'd love to share with you some of the things that I saw.
Delicious.
Hi, I'm here at the annual Labor Day Greek Festival, and it's just wonderful. It's so exciting. There's so many neat things to look at, and this is a wonderful replica of one of the most beautiful temples in Greece, right up there on the Acropolis. A lot of people give a lot of attention to the Parthenon, but as far as I'm concerned, this particular temple is the most beautiful. And right next to me is a wonderful symbol of Greece, an olive tree. And you know Greek cooking. You couldn't do anything without olives and without olive oil. This is a display from the Greek Orthodox Church. Inside there are several displays of some of the beautiful, beautiful icons that are in the church, some religious artifacts. Greek Orthodox Church is a very important part of life in Greece. This is actually one of my most favorite parts of the entire festival. This section here is just a complete display of artifacts, cultural items, costumes, all kinds of things from all the various islands of Greece. It's wonderful to see. It's so colorful, it's so beautiful. I love this display. Look at the sheep and the donkey. It just reminds me of my grandmother's life in her village. And I love the displays of the costumes. It's so beautiful and connecting with my heritage. In back of me is the Agora, and that's the Greek marketplace. It's got everything. T-shirts, cookbooks, maps, language books, all kinds of jewelry, pottery, everything. It's a wonderful place, and I can hardly wait to get going and spend money. Hi, we're in front of the food market right now. This is a great place. I can hardly wait to get in there, get some breads, and I want to get some Greek coffee too. Wasn't that fun? This is something you can attend yourself every year, Labor Day in Sacramento at the Sacramento Convention Center. Mark your calendar for the next time. Well, this is what I managed to get from this one lemon. And I'm not sure if it's quite a teaspoon, but you know what? It's going to do. That's why for people who don't have special citrus peel graters or people who are a little rushed for time, I think cinnamon is the best bet. But in goes the fresh lemon peel. And lastly, for flavor, you might want to add anywhere from a half to a full teaspoon of vanilla. It's not necessary, it's optional, but you just might enjoy the addition of vanilla. I'm not going to use it for the pie today, but you certainly could. It's time to mix everything up. Now from time to time you want to stop and make sure you scrape down everything because everything's got to be blended and incorporated. The sugar should be completely mixed and the honey too. I just want to check, make sure there's no lumps of anything anywhere. It looks good to me. And one more round of beating. That's it. Now this is a really simple pie filling, don't you think? These sponges are from my father's island, the island he was born on, the island of Kalymnos. It's in the Aegean Sea. It's part of the Dodecanese island chain. And in that island chain, the most famous island is Rhodes. These are especially meaningful to me because in my dad's youth, in his teenage years, he was a sponge diver. His island is famous for its sponge diving industry, and he was right in there, diving with the other young men of his village. And these are sponges that were sent over to us from relatives. And you can see there's sure a lot of variety. You have these smaller ones. They're beautifully shaped. I love the flat ones. This one here is, I think this is my favorite. This one over here looks like a big, giant bath sponge. But you can't beat these really big ones with their unusual configurations. What I think is so interesting about these sponges is that embedded in them there's little teeny pieces of shell, and every time I wash them, because they do need to be washed, they get dusty when they're on display, every time I wash them they still give that wonderful salty fragrance of the sea, of the ocean. And so this is part of the heritage that I have, and I really enjoy getting these sponges out and displaying them. My pie crust is cooled enough, so I'm just going to remove the aluminum foil with beans. And what I want to do now is I'm going to try this egg white thing. So I'm going to brush it with a little bit of that reserved egg white. Let it dry a bit before I pour the filling in. I think I'll brush up the sides too. And the pie crust isn't done. It just got cooked enough so that it shouldn't get soggy. All right, I'm going to leave this for a few minutes to just dry a bit. All right, I'm just going to leave this a few minutes to dry a bit, and I'm going to pour the remaining egg white back into my mixture and incorporate it. There's not much, maybe a little teaspoonful. All I need to do now is get the filling into the pie crust. I'm going to ladle it in as much as I can here, and then maybe I'll put in the last ladleful in the oven. I'm kind of a klutz when it comes to moving liquid things from one end of the kitchen to the other. So I don't want to have this filling falling all over the floor. Okay, I'm going to be daring and just put the whole thing in, and we'll see what happens. Now, if you were using cinnamon, at this point you could sprinkle a little cinnamon on top to make a little bit of color on the top. Into the oven this goes. You want to bake the pie in a 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. I would say start checking it after 35 minutes to see how it's doing, because you don't want it to burn. And if for some reason the crust is browning too quickly, then put some aluminum foil around the crust to cover it up. I would bake it on top of a cookie sheet or baking pan that's been in your oven and has also been preheated. That will help keep the bottom crust crispy, and it will also catch any drips from the pie while it's baking. So into the oven goes the pie. And I'm going to set my timer for 45 minutes. Well, I think the pie is done. At 45 minutes I checked it. It was still a little wiggly in the middle, so I left it for another 15 minutes, an entire hour. I covered some of the pie crust edges so they wouldn't get too brown. And I'm going to give this one last check. A knife or something, or a skewer, should go in and come out clean. And it does. So the filling is done, and out it comes. Here's the finished pie. You can see it's a beautiful, beautiful golden brown. It's slightly puffy, and if you make this pie, you might find that you'll have a few cracks in it. That's okay. That doesn't matter. What I want to do is just take it off the baking sheet and let it cool. It needs to cool at least 20 minutes before I even think about serving it. The pie has been cooling about a half hour. It's still warm, and it can be served right now as it is, warm. Or you could let it cool longer and serve it at room temperature. You could even chill it. It really doesn't matter. But I can't wait any longer, so I'm going to dig into it. I'm going to cut myself a nice size piece. Of course, you can cut the size pieces you want, but this looks good enough for me right now. And see if I can get this first slice out of the pie pan without too much trouble. That looks good, doesn't it? And you can serve this with some fresh fruit, berries, sliced strawberries. I wouldn't sweeten them because I think the pie's pretty sweet enough, but if you wanted to, you could sweeten them. And just a little fresh mint sprig to add some color. And you have a quick, easy Greek dessert. Isn't that amazing? And delicious. I'm going to have a taste right now. This is good.